So our first panelist, Aaron Abeyta, Colorado native, professor of English, former mayor of Antonito, and the co-founder of the Justice and Heritage Academy. He is author of 5 collections of poetry, 1 novel, for his book Colcha, which is one of the poems that he read out of. Abeyta received an American Book Award and the Colorado Book Award. His most recent book, Ancestral Fire, is shortlisted for the Reading the West Book Award. In addition, his novel Rise, Do Not Be Afraid, was a finalist for the 2007 Colorado Book Award and El Premio Aztlán. Abeyta was awarded a Colorado Council on the Arts Fellowship for Poetry and a former poet laureate of Colorado's Western Slope, as named by the Karen Chamberlain Poetry Festival. Abeyta is also a recipient of the Governor's Creative Leadership Award for 2017. He was a finalist for the Colorado Poet Laureate, 2019, along with being an author, scholar, community leader. Aaron is also a 9th-generation rancher. Aaron and his family have grazing permits on the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument, where they run 400 head of sheep and 200 head of cows. Thank you, Aaron, and welcome.
Thank you.
Mr. George Witten was born into ranching in Saguache, Colorado. Knowledge in all phases of sheep and cattle production. He specializes in grass finishing techniques, genetics, soil health, organic production, and certification, restorative ranching practices, and marketing. George has been applying the holistic management principles to his ranch for 40 years. George has served on the Colorado Department of Agriculture as a board member for 4 years and was appointed as a regional ag commissioner in 2023. George served on the board of directors of the Rio Grande Water Conservation District for more than 25 years, specifically on the Closed Base Project Committee. George believes more and more as he gets older in finding whole solutions to whole problems. Welcome, Mr. Witten. And then JD, I'm sorry, JD will be filling in for Justin, so can you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about you?
Okay, my name is JD Schmidt. I am a sheep and cattle rancher here in the San Luis Valley. We lamb out over 3,000 ewes, and I've got 400 goats, excuse me. We run on BLM, Forest Service, state ground, private ground, and the Monte Vista and Alamosa Refuge, and I have pastured on the Baca Refuge also. We've been here in the valley since 1976. My dad started it, and hopefully we're continuing. Well, excuse me, I also sit on a BLM range management board too, so.
Thank you and welcome, JD. So, Mr. Eric Valencia, born and raised in Pecos, New Mexico, came to the BLM Taos Field Office from the National Park Service, within which he spent over 6 years as Chief of Interpretation and Visitor Services for the Fort Laramie National Historic Site in Laramie, Wyoming. Prior to that, Valencia served as a park ranger at the Pecos National Historical Park in Pecos, New Mexico from 2004 to 2015. Valencia earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in History and a Master of Arts in Public Affairs from New Mexico Highlands University in Las Vegas. The U.S. Bureau of Land Management announced the creation of a dedicated manager position to oversee the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument and welcomed Eric Valencia as its first monument manager. Valencia has worked within the jurisdiction of the BLM Taos Field Office and oversees 245,290 acres of multiple-use public lands within the monument, which spans portions of Taos County and the Rio Arriba County. The Taos Field Office is in the process of developing a resource management plan for the monument, and Mr. Valencia is assisting in coordinating that effort. Welcome, Mr. Valencia. Thank you. So, okay. Kind of stand here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start with Mr. Abeyta, Aaron. First question, what has been your experience as a permittee on federal lands where agencies are working to balance overall land health with public issues?
Well, just a little bit of background that perhaps hasn't already been mentioned, but my brother is the real rancher, and I just grew up on the ranch, born and raised, still affiliated in whatever, but my brother and my nephew are the ones that run the sheep and the cattle out in the Llanos, just a little bit east of San Antonio Mountain, out by Pot Mountain. And we also have a grazing permit up in the Apache unit, which is in the Carson National Forest. So our experience has been essentially fluid from pre-monument to post-monument. Nothing has really changed other than we've experienced a little less vandalism now that it's a monument. The roads are a little bit better, so we find that that's a little bit more useful for us. Our equipment tends not to break so often. One of the things that maybe has been detrimental, although we've never really run sheep out by Pot Mountain, but now we can no longer run sheep out by Pot Mountain because that would put them in too close a proximity to the bighorn sheep. But we only run cattle out there anyway. So if the grazing band were to migrate west towards San Antonio Mountain where we run our sheep, that would probably be a bigger issue for us in terms of the bighorn sheep. But we haven't experienced anything. If anything, it's been actually a little bit better. We've had fewer generators stolen, fewer animals gone missing. Not that those things still haven't happened, they have. But for the most part, it's been a good thing for us with the monument. And I don't know if I've answered the question the way it was posed, but that's what
Yeah.
struck me.
Okay, thank you. George, same question. What has been your experience as a permittee on federal lands where agencies are working to balance overall land health and wildlife needs with public uses?
Well, can you hear me? My experience goes back to when I was a child. My grandfather and my dad ran sheep from Saguache, and they moved migration from the valley floor into the mountains every year. And so I grew up kind of on the tail end of that, and I got to go with those sheep into the mountains, and it was kind of a dying thing. And there was a lot of pressure against having sheep in the mountains back in those days. And I remember my father being very angry because people from the Forest Service came around who could say the words of grass in Latin, and they started talking to him about that they knew more about the grass than my grandfather and the people who'd herded there for 200 years. And so in the end, my father lost his sheep permits because he didn't know how to have a conversation with that. And so when I took over the ranch, and it made my dad a very angry man, and I wound up kind of taking over the ranch pretty early. And so right away I got involved with Cattlemen's Association. I got involved in different ways to try to deal with these agencies, and I wound up being on the water board for the Rio Grande Water Conservation District for 20-some years. In the mid-'80s, I studied under Alan Savory and holistic management, and so we started managing our cattle in a much different way than my grandfather and the way that they'd been managed for a long time. And there's a lot of work and a lot of change, and it was difficult, but it gave me a way to deal with the land managers. I have a great relationship with BLM, and every range con that's been up there, I've put in a lot of effort to make sure they understand what it is I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And we basically write our own prescription every year. We don't have to, they don't tell us when to move and how to move, because we do so much more than they would require, because we're herding, we're moving cattle around a lot, and they're always kept in a bunch. And so, and our range, the transects and everything show that it's an upward trend, and it's in dry country, just Tracy Canyon just south of Saguache. Almost no water in that place. I have 15 miles of pipeline coming from 4 gallons a minute. What could go wrong? So it's a daily job, but we love that country, and we've been there we were there before the BLM. My family was running livestock on that land, and so it's just like Aaron says, your bones, that we're part of that place. And so, but we have worked hard to get along with the BLM range cons, and we have a good relationship. I always feel that, we have a positive, but we kind of take responsibility for the land itself, and it's a very personal thing for us. And so that's my relationship with the BLM. I've run cattle on refuge with Ron and, done a lot of different things up there. But anyway, that's it for BLM.
Thank you. Thank you, George.
We good?
Okay, so JD, same question. What has been your experience as a permittee on federal lands where agencies are working to balance overall land health and wildlife needs with public uses?
Well, our deal is really diversified. I have pretty much a good relationship with all the individuals and the agencies that I work with. I feel sometimes that they are too by the book, too by the paper. Well, it says here you're not supposed to be on till June 10th. Well, it's good and green and it's ready to go. Oh, it says you're supposed to be off the 1st of July. Well, it's really good. Why can't we make use of the resource that we have? The trouble in the San Luis Valley is you can get 3 inches of rain here in this country, but over by Monte Vista you get a 1/4 inch. And it's really hard for me to make sure that my livestock's good and the ground is good. I do know that when everybody says environmentalist, it's supposedly a bad word to the rancher, but people have to remember that we are the first environmentalists. If we don't take care of our country that we run on, then we're out of business. And one of the greatest things, as far as I'm concerned, when I'm out there is to see wildlife. And it's been my experience that wildlife follow the livestock because we take care of the old feed. It's very important that we get the old feed off so that if it rains, then the new feed can get the nutrients out of it. And it's really important that we have, as ranchers, as much control over that as we can. So my experience has been everything, the whole spectrum, good, bad, ugly, and not be able to use when we should be able to use it. So anyway, we try to do our best we possibly can to protect the resource. And I think in a lot of places we have become, a rancher is a bad name. Oh, look what he's just destroying everything. But in reality, we're not. We're keeping it fresh. So that's about it for now, I guess.
Thank you, Judy. Mr. Valencia, so has the monument, and we're talking about the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument, increased funding for management capabilities as a result of the designation?
So before I begin, I want to thank you all for the invitation to come on up, and I do want to thank the local BLM field office as well for allowing me to be here. It was actually quite the shock when I looked to contact the local BLM field office to find out that the new field manager was actually a colleague of mine. I did spend a year about working in the San Luis Valley, working up at the Great Sand Dunes as well, so it's good to be back in the valley as well. Indeed, the monument does have its own budget in that context. The biggest part of that is my position. That is a direct result of that management policy, that unique management for your monument is in place.
Thank you.
I'm just going to share a real quick story. This happened when I was a boy. We went out to go pump water to our cattle there on the Mestas. I don't know if anybody knows where that is, but it's right there by the Ute Mountain. And we got a 30,000 gallon stock tank there. And we go about every 2 or 3 days, depending on how hot it is. And so we got there one day, 3 days in, and we knew something was wrong because there was no cows out at the salt. There was no cows in the bull pasture. There was just no cows anywhere, so we knew that there was something wrong. We got to the corral, and somebody had broke the float on the stock tanks, and all 30,000 gallons had flowed out. And when we got there, the calves and the cows were all stuck in the mud. There was 7 dead calves. The crows were already eating at the eyes and everything of the calves. And I'm like maybe 10 years old, and my dad walks out in the middle of all the mud and the shit and the piss, and he takes the one calf that's still alive, barely. And I remember him giving that calf CPR for about 30 minutes blowing into its nose. And so when you mentioned environmentalism and environmentalists, and that's a bad word, that was my first, I guess, memory or run-in with environmentalists. And on our side of our stock tank, they had written welfare ranchers. I didn't even know what that meant. I was 10 years old, but that calf died right there in my dad's arms, and I knew that there was something wrong with that. And I tell you that story because that was pre-monument, right? And we've not experienced anything like that. I'm not going to say that that kind of thing won't happen again, but we've never experienced anybody just blatantly attacking us the way they did back then. So that was one of those memories that really shaped me and my family, my brothers especially, I think. But it's something that sticks with you, let's put it that way. But in my mind, it's been a better situation only because we haven't had to see that type of vandalism and hurt the way we did. So.
Sharing that. Mr. Whitten, can you give us an update on the Colorado Ag Commission, specifically your conversations about developing partnerships?
Well, about 7 months ago, I was appointed as a regional ag commissioner underneath Commissioner Greenberg, who's the commissioner for the state of Colorado. And before that, for 4 years, I was on the Colorado Ag Commission board as a rancher, representing all of you and myself. And so my job now is to be a liaison between you and the Ag Commission. And the Colorado Ag Commission is very interested in making sure agriculture continues. And, it's who is the Colorado Ag Commission? They're the potato inspectors, the brand inspectors, the people who make sure scales work, are tested and verified. It's the Division of Animal Welfare and the state veterinarian, and those are all departments within the Colorado Department of Agriculture. It's a very big department with hundreds of employees all over the state. And their business job is to keep agriculture running, to make sure that the potatoes are inspected, the cattle are inspected, and that when you send a load of potatoes to a grocery store, they have to pay you for them because they were inspected before they left. So they can't say, well, these potatoes were bad and I'm not going to pay for them. That used to happen. So that's what the Department of Ag does, is it makes sure that whatever was sent was weighed and measured, and that the scales that they were run over were accurate. And that's what the Colorado Department of Ag is really about. But it's also about soil health and about bringing young people into agriculture. There's a lot of money available now for people who want to be involved in agriculture and get grants. There's an apprentice program, very similar to the one my wife Julie and I run. There's an interest in bringing young people on and in soil health. And soil health is so important because it affects the water holding capacity of your soils. And the San Luis Valley right now, we all know the conditions that we are facing with water. And so if we can develop more organic matter, better soils, then we can hang on to that water longer and use less. And so, that's a big focus of the Department of Ag. And so it's a little bit about what we're doing right now. So, yeah.
Mr. Valencia, do you feel the monument has adequate resources, funding / personnel to manage and protect its resources of value?
So before I begin, I'd like to read a portion of the proclamation that set aside the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument. It says, laws, regulations, and policies followed by the BLM in issuing and administering grazing permits or leases on lands under its jurisdiction shall continue to apply with regard to the lands in the monument, consistent with the purpose of this proclamation. One of the biggest things about this proclamation was the protection of traditional use. Step one in the administration and in the management, and hopefully getting enough there to, begin to build a staff to manage the monument is the resource management plan that we're working on, and I'll talk a little bit about later. But in all honesty, we are not able to do the job that we would like to do without our partners, our permittees, our special recreation permittees, all the folks that are out there on that land and sharing with us and participating in the stewardship and protection of those lands as well. So we are always looking to facilitate those relationships and those partnerships because you're our best friends and we're all in this together. So I hope you know that.
What features or aspects along the San Luis Hills area are most important to you, and do you feel they are deserving of increased protection? Excuse me.
Well, the San Luis Hills means family to me, because that's where my ancestors first decided that they were going to make a stand, right? My mom's family's down from Ortiz, but my dad's side was in and around the San Luis Hills, Manassa, Los Rincones, all those places. And just from I'm just speaking about my heritage and my life, to me that's that transitional zone. It's the place where my past and my present and everything comes together. I don't know that this is relevant, but to me it's relevant, so I'm going to share it with you. My grandfather was LDS, my aunts and uncles are LDS, my dad was LDS until he decided he wanted to marry my mom. And I say that because that part of the world is where they came from. That part of the world is what reminds me of that part of my ancestry, that part of my heritage. And I realize it's just hills, I realize it's the river, and to other people driving by it's just those things. But to me it's a communion, with my people, and my grandfather's line in particular. And so that's what they remind me. So to the question, should they be protected, I'd say, well, do we want our families protected? And I'd say, heck yeah, right? And are we associating the land as family? In my family, the land is part of us, right? It's part of our family. And I would protect my family no matter what, against anybody. So that goes for the water, that goes for the land. So when I see the San Luis Hills and I see what it represents, it's more than just land to me, it's part of my family. And my grandfather used to say something, que se beneficien de ella, right? That they benefit from her. And he was not referring to a female, he was referring to the land, that we benefit from it. And that's what the San Luis Hills and that entire region means to me. This town, in fact, means that to me. So.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Mr. Whitten, do you feel there could be a mutually beneficial management opportunity moving forward with better resources, with better resource coordination through a national conservation area designation?
Well, I think there's that possibility. I think as long as the language that's written into that proclamation truly honors the practices that have gone on there in the past, and also to aid in that. There are a lot of ways to run cattle and sheep on grass that people don't necessarily know about nowadays. I mean, there's been going on for a long time, but the real management takes work. And if people love that piece of land and they affiliate with that, then they should think of ways to make it better, and make it better for both themselves and their livestock. And those things are all possible. And as much as the BLM can aid in that with building pipelines or stock tanks or helping build fences or create the infrastructure that costs a lot of money, most of us can't afford to buy all those things. And so if there's money available for management and training, and in a way that protects those practices, then I think it could actually be a good thing.
Thank you, Mr. Whitten. So just a clarification as well, through an NCA designation, there is no presidential proclamation, different process. And I know we covered these at the first meeting, so I just want to point that out. Thank you so much. JD, do you feel there could be a mutually beneficial management opportunity moving forward with better resource coordination through and National Conservation Area designation.
Well, as I said before, it's just oversight. Who's in charge of the oversight of it? Is it us or is it somebody someplace else? I think it could be very beneficial in a lot of ways. But I'm a little worried about what happens. As I said before, we have good BLM in place. We have the Rio Grande corridor is being taken care of. And as far as resources to improve that, I mean, yeah, you could probably improve a road, but that, you know, there's not as much out there as people think. If you do some improvement, is it detrimental to that ground for more traffic? Well, this is a monument, and okay, well, people will start using that more. And that I would be concerned about it for the simple reason of if it'd be more traffic, how that would impact not only my business, but the wildlife out there. So I'm not really totally convinced that's what we need to do.
Okay, thank you, JD. Mr. Valencia, has the New Mexico designation, or the National Monument designation, excuse me, I see an M and right away I think New Mexico. Has the National Monument designation resulted in greater law enforcement capabilities / presence for the area?
So in the last couple of years, we were able to hire a full LEO or law enforcement staff. So currently the field office has 3 law enforcement officers. One is entirely dedicated to patrolling the National Monument, and he does receive assistance when necessary from an individual who has responsibility for patrolling down in the Española area. So indeed, with that help of that extra officer, we do have more presence out on the monument. We also have put a lot of effort into hiring some seasonal rangers in our recreation areas, in areas such as that, so to have presence out in the monument as well. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, the folks on the ground, the eyes on the ground are a huge asset to us. So we definitely need folks out there letting us know what's going on.
Thank you. Can you give us an update on where you are on the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument Management Plan?
So the question for you is, how detailed do you want me to be? No, absolutely. You know, one of the greatest things about working on a resource management plan is the ability to work with the local community and to really get to know them and what their stances are and where their interests and their concerns are as well. The monument is currently being managed as under what was the 2012 Resource Management Plan of the Taos Field Office. The monument was set aside or designated a year later. So there hasn't really been any changes in management of that. And when we went through that 2012 Resource Management Plan, we found that, hey, things are working really well, the way that we have this set out. So when we started working on something specific to the monument, we decided we were going to look at some things that may or may not have changed in the last decade. And we were going to amend that 2012 RMP. So actually what we're working on is an amendment, right? It's an RMP amendment. On September 20th, we just finished the initial round of public scoping. So we are currently consolidating and looking at comments and things of that sort. And I was actually doing that today, and it's amazing actually the diversity of comments that you see from your different constituents, if you will. So what we're going to be doing in the next few months is we're going to be consolidating those comments, addressing those comments, And then we're going to start to develop what we call alternatives, all right? And those of you know that process, there's going to be at least 3 alternatives, and alternative A is going to be just do what you're doing, and then there's going to be some other things that come about there. So we should have a draft or draft alternatives done by, the first of the year or so, like that. We will continue to work with our tribal with our tribal partners as well, our consulting parties, if you will, and our cooperating associations. Our cooperators are going to help us draft EA or RMP in the process as well. And that's important when you're working on an RMP like this, is that you have all your local government-to-government organizations participating in actually drafting this with us, right? We're not doing this on our own. So those partnerships are really, really important. We, or you, will have another opportunity to comment on those alternatives, and that's probably going to be somewhere around the first or second week of April of next year. We'll move forward with all those comments and all that sort of stuff, and we will, there'll be an opportunity, of course, if you disagree with us to, disagree with us at that point. But what we're really doing is we're hoping to have this published by the fall of 2024. So we got about a year of hard work ahead of us. I hope to see all of you down there at the next public scope and share your wisdom with us down there as well. So
Thank you.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So before we move into question and answer, so to Chris's question, or the concern, so the first meeting that we had in Antonito at the end of June, we really honed in on what was the difference between National Monument designation and National Conservation Area designation. And what we can say is the main distinction is the process. So for National Monument, there's a presidential proclamation, executive order. It can go through that process, but there is a presidential proclamation. Now for National Conservation Area, there is no presidential proclamation. It doesn't go through executive order. It goes through legislation. So I know my BLM is here, so if I'm saying it wrong, okay, please correct me. So that's the main, so we talked about last time in detail was what National Monument meant versus National Conservation Area. So when we talk about presidential proclamation, an NCA designation wouldn't have a presidential proclamation. What we talked about is really, so in 2019, there were talks about permanently protecting the lands along the Rio Grande corridor from the Punche to the wildlife, to the Alamosa Wildlife Refuge. There was conversations happening in 2019, meetings with Senator Bennett's office and community members. COVID hit, the meeting stopped. So what we did was we came in as San Luis Valley Ecosystem Council and said, okay, is this still something the community wants? Are you still, so right now we're in the process of still gauging. We wanted this to be community-led, and what Slovak and I would do is facilitate meetings. We asked if for this meeting, if somebody would be consider being a chair if we want meetings going forward. So we took everything from last meeting, community concerns, like we said, the questions, and that's how we formed the panel, and that's what we're doing tonight, is addressing those concerns, those questions, those comments from the first meeting. So again, it's not necessarily saying, okay, we're going forward an NCA designation. It's still, is this what the community wants? Is this what the community feels would be important, is permanently protecting the lands out there? So that's what the first meeting was about.
Actually, I would say that what a National Conservation Area does is it provides economic opportunity. And what that means is that other, members of the public would be experiencing BLM lands. And if it's managed well, that means there's education opportunities, there's recreation opportunities. And, you know, I gave a couple examples of that, like, and probably the biggest right now is the McGinnis Canyon National Conservation Area, which is in Colorado, but also goes to Moab, Utah. And it's become, and it's like the most possible extreme you could imagine. But it basically has brought in about $290 million, because you have people that are going there to bike. You have people that are going there to enjoy 26 miles of the Colorado River. And, you know, and of course the biking trail goes, you know, from Colorado into Moab. That is an extreme example, but I felt it was really important to show, you know, what it's done for that area. The other example was Dominguez Escalante has also become a national conservation area. Now that's more low-key, and they still have you know, recreation opportunities, but it is on a far more minimal scale. And it's because the people that were involved in these areas basically made decisions about where they wanted it to go. And then I also gave the example, and just so you know, I live in Saguache County, so I saw what happened when the Great Sand Dunes went from a national monument to a national park. It was a game changer for Saguache County. And it's brought in, I think, and honestly I can't remember, but I think it's about $47 million a year. And so, and is it contained? Yes. Are small businesses benefiting? Absolutely. And so it's really, honestly, provided a lot of opportunity for the next generation, and for people being able to experience a place, and you know, and when it's done well, it's identifying with their own sense of place, which I think the San Luis Valley does an incredible job of providing. Because honestly, there aren't very many places like this left, and the visual landscape here, and you know, when you look out, and I remember the first time I went to Flat Top Mesa, I looked out and I was thinking, I could have been here 500 years ago, or 500 years from now. I mean, there's just a timelessness. And what I really want to emphasize more than anything, you know, the education opportunities, the fact that, you know, there's a living legacy of 10,000 years because of the Pueblos, and they're having gone back and forth into the valley. I mean, there aren't very many places like that in the country. And so there's huge education opportunities to really understand this place, and to set up kiosks and places for people to camp, and, you know, basically to be able to have people experience this place. And I guess really the issue is, do you all want to share it? Because people are coming anyway. People are discovering these places anyway. And so it's a matter of how it's going to be managed. And the Rio Grande Natural Area that got designated between the Alamosa Refuge to the state line never got any appropriation. They never got any money to manage that area. That 33-mile corridor, BLM basically was given this designation, but they weren't given any financial resources. So this is a way to tie it together and to be able to basically generate more resources. And public-private partnerships work well when people are involved. And communities benefit, families benefit, small businesses definitely benefit. And so it's a matter of, just providing this information and for people to think about it.
Just a couple of my thoughts or questions or whatever. Probably the first thing that I would point out is ranchers have a concern because if agriculture is gone, society's gone. Very simply put, and so as we talk about designations, we talk about different rules and things that define laws, I should say, not rules. Then this is our heritage. It's something that, as mentioned by Mr. Witten, that before any of the government agencies were out there, our ancestors were, and they were working on that land. I only speak tonight as a taxpayer, as I'm speaking towards my personal dollars that go to the public. And I would love to see more money go to our county and to do the things that they do. And if that's part of that designation and, try to help the public in general. We talk about businesses. Is there a way that our local businesses can be helped through that funding? But that's a whole nother thing. One thing I'd point out is you've all been to a certain store. I'm not going to name any names, especially publicly, but we all have been through the self-checkout. And I want to point out tonight that as a rancher, we do a lot of self-checkout on our own. And the way that we do that, or one way that I do that, and I brought this tonight, this bag here is completely full of everything associated with that allotment. It's about 5 miles from here and the San Luis Hills. I have books on weed management. I study. I've studied the MOUs between the BLM, the National Forest Service, and ranchers, and to have them out and to be stewards over the land. And tonight, I don't have time to go through it, and neither do you, but I just present that this isn't a public record. This is my record. But this is my information, my data that I've spent time, evenings away, from whatever I'm doing, and built this information. The reason why I want defensible data is so when I'm called out and said, well, what do you have? I do have information that I can go off. I was fortunate to be part of a study in 2008 where ranchers and the community came together, and it was to bring government agencies and ranchers together so we could have more just on-the-ground monitoring, more, just making very informed decisions as we're out there. And that's our goal, I do have questions about monuments and like I feel like also, as Mr. Bagwell stated, I don't think we've had adequate time to really have a good study of what a monument does. I'm all for more funding. I would love more, just resources to the rancher to help the public lands. Also do want to say too that we take a lot of our own funding, money, resources, time to develop resources out there. I had two of they're my oldest now, but they were very young. They were out scattering salt in some of these ponds out here so we could have some adequate water resources that still stand today. And so I do want to point that out. I do want to thank everyone tonight for taking this time and coming together as a community because we are a community and we have to work together. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
And if you'll just all allow me to take my BLM hat off for a moment. Growing up in northern New Mexico from a very, long traditional ranching family as well, and having a permit on the United States Forest Service, and tragically, through changes in stuff and not being able to hold on to that, which I regret, and I'll regret for the rest of my life. When I first read that proclamation for the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument, I'll tell you what excited me the most, and why I moved from bleeding a green and gray of the National Park Service to a blue and gray of the BLM, was the multi-use mission that the BLM has. And managing a monument on a multi-use mission was exciting to me, because of the importance of these traditional ways of life and the traditional heritage and the culture and everything that's involved on these lands, as that was expressed earlier by our three panelists here. And when I read that proclamation, everything in there is for that protection. It is for the protection of this lifeways that we have. So I think, in many respects, there are other things to consider when you're considering a designation for the long run. And every talk that I've had about in this scoping period and things of that sort, I've told those stories of my family and everything that it's meant to me and everything of that sort, right? And these designations sometimes are not necessarily about us, but they're about our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and what we're going to leave behind for them. And how are we going to protect those lifeways? And will there be something there? So just wanted to share that because when I came here very, very excited and proud to be a participant in working with all of you and working with everyone in Taos County as well in preserving and protecting the lifeways of northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. So. Yeah.
I do not want to keep anybody off of there. Believe me, I'm not saying that. If they want to go out there, more power to you. Help yourself. I don't want to lock a gate on it or anything like that.
Thank you. Will be the last one, and then.
So one thing that I think should be brought up is that I believe, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is that in 2008 there was an attempt to do oil and gas exploration on the land that we're talking about. And the reason that it didn't follow through with success was the fact that Ecosystems Council alerted Canales County commissioners that it was happening, and they put a stop to it. But as I understand, currently the BLM lands are not protected from a further exploration attempt if anybody is so interested. Am I correct? Okay, so that's what I think people need to understand is a national conservation area would prevent that from ever happening. So current permittees who would have their animals subjected to possible oil drilling or gas drilling, methane drilling, whatever might be found out there, would be on their permit land, and there would be nothing that could currently be done about it. If I'm correct, BLM folks, am I correct? Anyway, so I just think that's something to consider about when you're considering whether you want to do a conservation area, because that does put permittees at risk on BLM lands currently, and nothing would essentially change in terms of grazing, but it would protect those grazing rights from potential mining and oil exploration. Okay.
Thank you, Loretta. Before we close out, Sean, do you want to give an update on the management plan, or? Okay, I just didn't know if you wanted to or not. No pressure.
Yeah. Was okay. Annalie was just asking me to give you guys an update a little bit on our upcoming resource management plan, kind of what Eric is talking about for an amendment to the Taos Field Office Management Plan. And right now we're just scheduled for 2025. So Dale, I don't know if you have anything in addition to that, but yeah, we're scheduled to begin that in 2025. And that'll be an opportunity to take our 1991 resource management plan and pretty much open up that can of worms and take a look at all resources at that time. And that'll be a multi-year process for sure.
Thank you, Sean. So it's already past the hour of 8. We said that we would close out at 8. So I just wanted to say again, thank you to everyone who came out, who took time away from their family, who wanted to participate tonight. To our panelists, thank you so much for coming. For Mr. Valencia, thank you for coming. He's got a long way to go home. So again, this is what can happen with community. We can come together, solve problems, talk, open without having open discussion and without disrespect. And this was amazing. So I really, again, thank you. We wanted to ask before leaving if there was any interest in moving forward or having another work session, having another meeting when it came to NCA designation, possibly in November. So be thinking about that, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.